let's continue our discussion regarding experimental design and data collection and talk specifically about the different types of designs. The first design is known as a controlled experiment. And the second that we were talking about is going to be referred to as an observational study. Now, controlled experiment, the experiment actually controls or manipulates the environment in some way, and then they record the result as a result of that manipulation. When we do a controlled experiment, typically we break down our experiment into two major groups. The first being what we refer to as the experimental group, which is sometimes also referred to as the treatment group, and the other being the control group. Now, here's the idea, is in the experimental group, this is a group that's getting this new treatment or new whatever it is that you're testing out. The control group is perhaps, if we're talking about medical studies, getting the current treatment, or maybe no treatment at all. And the idea behind this is that if we have this control group, this group that's not getting anything, or perhaps a current treatment, and we compare it with this treatment group that's getting this new treatment, now we have a baseline for comparison to see if our new process, our new treatment, whatever it is that we're working with, is actually doing better than the other was. So that's the idea, the basic idea behind breaking up a controlled experiment into the experimental or commonly referred to as treatment group and the control group. Now, very commonly in medical research, we conduct what's known as blind experiments. In a blind experiment, the test subjects do not know if they're getting the drug, the real thing, the real treatment, or a placebo. Now, a placebo is something that is neutral, but it resembles a treatment in that maybe it's a pill. This capsule has maybe distilled water in it. This capsule has a real drug. The capsule with distilled water is our placebo. Commonly, people think of placebos as being sugar pills. Well, that's not true. If you're doing some type of controlled experiment with persons with diabetes, you won't be giving the person with diabetes sugar pills as a placebo. It would not be neutral, not for someone with diabetes. So very common, like saline or distilled water or something like that is used in capsule. The whole idea behind this is that think of a cancer group. And suppose everybody in this course has terminal cancer, and collectively we come together to participate in some type of medical trial, a clinical trial. Now, if you know you have clinical or terminal cancer, then you know in your own mind that 2 months down the road, 6 months down the road, whatever, that you're going to die from this cancer. So now you're in this clinical trial to test this new medicine. To you, it's like your last hope. It's your last hope of survival. The natural tendency, once you enter this group or enter this trial and start receiving the medication, whether it's a real medication or it's a placebo, the natural tendency is to start feeling better. You may start reporting that you're feeling better. Well, the thing is, if one part, half the group is getting a placebo and the other half, or some other proportion will break down, it does not have to be 50-50, but if part of the group's getting the placebo, part of the group's getting the real thing, then this tendency, known as a placebo effect, this tendency to start feeling better, it will be equal in both groups. Now, if this drug really works, if this new treatment really works, then the improvement will continue at some hopefully measurable level for the treatment group, but the placebo group is going to plateau off. And now it's this difference that we can hopefully measure to show that the treatment group really is, or this new treatment really is, improving quality of life, expectancy of life, life expectancy, how long they're going to live, improving something to do with this disease. So that's basically the idea behind giving people a placebo in a blind experiment. You don't want your subject to know which group that they're actually in to avoid that placebo effect. Now, in a double-blind experiment, it's the same idea, but the difference is the person taking the measurement, they don't know who gets a placebo and who's got the real thing. See, the problem is, if the person taking the measurement knows this person has the placebo, this person gets the real thing, there could be a natural tendency, nothing bad about this person, just kind of natural tendency to report the people getting the treatment are doing better than the placebo group. So we want to remove that possibility whenever we can by doing a double-blind experiment where the person's taking the measurements don't know who's getting what either. Suppose that you work for an orthopedic surgeon who's come up with a new technique for doing rotator cuff surgery for baseball players or something. And you have, say, 10 people in each group. 10 people got the old surgery, 10 people got the new surgery. And you're measuring range of motion or something with the arm. If you don't know who got the new treatment, then you're not going to have this tendency to think that, oh gosh, this treatment really is working better, so their range of motion is improving much faster than the other group. It helps eliminate that possibility. It helps keep honest people honest while they're collecting the data. Most controlled experiments, particularly in medical research, are known as prospective studies. Now, the idea behind a prospective study is that we study future events, meaning that people come into the study, we start now, and we follow them into the future. So we collect data as time goes on. They start at some point, and we collect data as time goes on. We don't mean that we're trying to predict the future. It's a very common mistake that students tend to make in trying to describe what prospective studies are. Prospective studies are not trying to use a crystal ball effect to figure out what's going to happen off in the future. Prospective studies start now, and then we go into the future. As time goes on, we collect data as time goes on. That's the prospective end of it. And when I say start now, it may start now for you. It may start 6 months from now from somebody else that just entered the study. It's not like if we're going to have 100 people in the study total, that all 100 have to start today. This could be a study that goes over 6, 8, 10 years, and over the next 3 or 4 years, we're constantly getting new people into the study. Well, whenever they come into the study, that is their now. That's when we start collecting their data, and as time goes on, we keep collecting the data. That's the idea behind a prospective study. An observational study is not prospective. Observational studies, people self-assign themselves into groups. Okay, back in the prospective for medical, we would assign somebody as being part of the experimental, the treatment group, or the placebo group. In an observational study, people self-assign themselves. They don't assign themselves in respect of they walk up to you and say, hey, I'm going to be part of the study and I want to be part of that group. No, they self-assign themselves by their actions they've already done. As an example, suppose we're trying to determine whether smoking really does cause lung cancer or not. Okay, if some reason it's still questioning in somebody's mind. So, we don't grab 100 people and say, you 50, you smoke 12 packs of cigarettes a day, and we're going to check to see how many have had lung cancer 5 years from now. And you 50 people, no smoking whatsoever, stay away from it. You can't do that with people. Rather, you contact, maybe in medical records, people that have lung cancer, and when you look at the records, you figure out, or you find out based on the records, whether they smoke and how much they smoke. See, they've assigned themselves to the smoking or non-smoking group already, just by their actions. That's the difference in observational study. Now, in an observational study, there's no manipulation of the environment. Okay, we're not controlling anything here. It's happened. It's already happened. We're just collecting the data. As an example, we may go into medical records. Like I said with the lung cancer thing, we just take a look at somebody's medical record. They have lung cancer. Do they smoke or not? Opinion polls are observational studies. If I conduct an opinion poll and ask people who they're going to vote for in the upcoming presidential election, I'm not trying to sway their answers. I shouldn't be. Not if I'm doing good research. I'm just simply gathering data that exists. They already have an opinion. When I call somebody on the phone and say, hey, I'm so-and-so with whatever agency, and I'm collecting a poll regarding this upcoming presidential election, if the election was today, who would you vote for? If they say Joe Schmuckatelli, then that's fine. I'm not going to argue with them and say, that person's a Democrat or Republican, or you should do the independent. I'm not going to get into that with them. Just simply, what's your opinion? Thank you. Record it. There's no manipulation of the data. Observational studies are either retrospective or cross-sectional. In a retrospective study, we study past events. like I said, maybe medical records. Medical records is a really good example of a retrospective observational study. They've already experienced the event that we're questioning, we're researching, and we go back and retrace the history of the case. Very common in medical records. A cross-sectional study is actually a snapshot in one point in time. Now, when I say one point in time, I'm not talking about instantaneous right now. If I'm doing a political poll, it could take me a week to contact everybody. That week is my snapshot in time. That's the opinion of perhaps the nation, if I'm working for some big, like the Gallup poll or something like that. That's the opinion of the people we contact in the nation, perhaps the registered voters or likely voters, at that point in time. That would be an opinion poll. Okay, so cross-sectional is now. It's a cross-section of time, what's going on right now. Where retrospective looks at past events, something that's already occurred, medical records, some type of record that already exists. Randomization is a very key element in experimental design. It's extremely important. One of the main objectives of randomization is to reduce or make a reduction in the bias by ensuring the groups, by making a comparison between the treatment group and the control group, our placebo group, help making sure that all these groups are similar to begin with. Now, if we're talking about cancer again, let's say we have 50 people in a study that have some type of cancer. Some of those 50 people, who knows, could be 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. Some of them may have some type of genetic predisposition that they're going to beat this cancer. It doesn't matter if they take our treatment or not. They're going into remission. They're going to be fine. It's just the way it's going to be. Thing is, we don't know who they are. So by randomizing, it increases the probability that those people are end up equal in both groups. If all of them ended up in the treatment group, that would end up with a bias toward the treatment group. It would make the treatment group look better than what it really is. If we could identify these people, then we'd get them out to begin with and study them on a separate study, try to figure out why they're going to beat this cancer and learn from that. But because we can't possibly identify them, there's no way to identify them, we use some type of randomization technique to determine which group they go into, which group everybody goes into, and hopefully we even these out. Likewise, there are going to be people in this study that it doesn't matter what we do, that they're probably going to lose their fight against that cancer very quickly. So by randomizing, put them in both groups, that helps to cancel out the effect in measuring the effectiveness of the treatment versus the placebo. Randomization also helps guard against unknown confounding factors in a control versus experimental groups. Now, a confounding factor, sometimes referred to as a lurking variable, is a hidden factor that has an effect, has a direct effect on the response, which you're trying to measure, but you haven't accounted for it. As an example, let's take a quick look here, and let's suppose that we were silly enough to go out and contact a bunch of grade school students, say 1st grade through 6th grade. And there's two things I want to measure from each student. I'm going to measure their shoe size, and I'm going to measure their reading level. Now, if I do that, say a person here on this graph will represent a very low shoe size, 12 feet, and a very low reading level. A person up here would represent somebody with bigger feet and a much higher reading level. So when I collect the data and I plot it, what I end up with is something that's miraculous. It looks like this. What I see is this nice linear trend. And from this, my conclusion, which, by the way, this could be another example of junk science, because I see this nice linear trend, is that as the kids' feet gets bigger, so do their reading skills. So my conclusion is children with big feet read better. That's pretty stupid. The confounding factor here that I've completely ignored is age. What happens as kids go from 1st grade to 2nd grade to 3rd grade out to 6th grade, right? They get older. What happens as they get older? They grow. What happens to their feet? They get bigger. As you progress through the grades, what happens to your reading ability? You learn how to read. a sixth grader should be reading much better than a first grader, right? So this type of trend, bigger feet, actually as they get older, will correspond with their reading ability. Confounding factor is age. Age has a direct effect on the reading level, what you're trying to measure, but you didn't control for it. If you redid this study, which again is kind of stupid to begin with, but if you redid it and you controlled for age, you would see that there's a variability in shoe sizes. Not every kid in first grade has the same size shoe. You would also see there's a variability in their reading ability. Not every kid in first grade reads at the same level. They all read at slightly different levels. So if you measure it, what you're going to actually see is a blob. You see kids with little feet that read very well and not so well. Kids with big feet in first grade that read well and not so well. So there's no association there whatsoever. Again, because we controlled for this confounding factor being age. Quite often in designs of experiments or in surveys, data research, we need to control for potential biases or confounding factors. If we're doing research regarding political opinions, it may be wise to control for or group by ethnicity groups or political parties. There's a reason we have more than one political party in this country, because the two political parties think differently on many measures. If they all thought the same, there'd be one party. So by controlling for the confounding factor being what political party they belong to, we can help eliminate confounding factors and help eliminate biases. Randomization, like in the cancer research, can help control for confounding factors that we can't identify. We have no idea that they even exist to begin with. So randomization is extremely important in conducting research. Okay, that's going to wrap up this particular section. In the next section, we're going to actually take a look at some data collection techniques. There are 3 different techniques to actually collect the data that we're going to be discussing.